Giles, welcome to People in Legal.
Thanks very much, David. It's been a long time coming, but here we are.
I know, it's amazing. I mean, we saw you in Sydney about 4 weeks ago or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And you tried to get me on the podcast then, but I think we were a bit too busy networking, and frankly, you had a stacked agenda. So I'm glad we could finally make it happen.
You guys were just, I mean, there was plenty of interest in your solution.
Yeah, and actually also, to be honest, I looked a little bit of a wreck after the flight. So it's better that had the opportunity to sort of preen myself before the session.
Better do that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Giles, for our audience and subscribers, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and your journey in legal tech?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Giles Thompson. I'm head of revenue at Avvoka. Some of the Aussies call it Avvoka. Either is fine. Yeah, and what I do is I essentially lead all of our sales activities and a little bit of marketing as well. In a former life, all lawyers seem to do this, but I was a lawyer. I was a commercial litigator focusing on intellectual property, but I quite quickly realized that actually there was an exciting new thing happening in legal tech. Well, legal tech's not new, but there was certainly an acceleration happening. I'm quite entrepreneurial, so a jump ship. And yeah, I think we're really at the forefront of the legal disruption that's happening. And more specifically, we do document automation. So for those who are unanointed, that is really taking template contracts and converting those into questionnaires using software. And then those questionnaires are then used by lawyers or other folks who then complete those questionnaires to draft bespoke contracts or other legal docs.
Wow. So I'm just going back to the beginning of what you talked about. I mean, you were actually practicing as a lawyer when you've gone from lawyer into legal tech. I mean, that's quite a jump.
Yeah, well, if you're not actually that good a lawyer, legal tech's quite a good route that you can explore.
I'm sure you're a
Um,
very good lawyer.
Well, I think I'm adequate. I think what actually made me maybe a bit of an irritating person to deal with when I was in private practice was
Hmm.
asking the question, why do we do it this way?
Yeah.
Or can we do it this way? And I was often criticized for, just do the job, stay in your lane and don't question it. Which actually, I think where you're delivering legal advice, often it is pretty deterministic. You're looking at problems and you're structuring them, you're deconstructing them, and really most stuff's been done before. The amount of true novel arguments you're making or contracts is limited, hence why we're in automation. But look, that didn't really suit me, and that's not to diminish what lawyers are doing. I think it's just as the junior associate, you have to do a lot of kind of the formulaic stuff before you end up able to do that novel stuff. You got to earn your stripes, as it were. So yeah, no, did enjoy law, but actually kind of wanting to ask those questions, and asking them of people who are frankly millionaires off of the back of their ability to manage a business and practice law, was a bit jarring, I think.
I guess going from being on the client side and providing a service into a sales role, like head of sales, that's another interesting sort of jump as well.
Yeah, and I think, look, ultimately, I was fairly incompetent salesperson when I was first hired, speaking frankly. Query whether, I'm still, where I should be in terms of my sales ability. But what I think was really helpful was I was able to empathize with our prospective customers. When I joined, we, were less than 500,000 revenue, annual recurring revenue, but I was quite quickly able to, sign some small contracts with, lawyers who had similar problems to me in the past. And now we've got the sales down a little bit more, and we're able to do slightly larger contracts and help our clients implement the solution, much quicker. But yeah, certainly I majored on the kind of trust point. I think something people don't talk about is actually lawyers like to buy off of lawyers very often, and they're also extremely discerning, I would say. So actually, you might do a presentation, but if you put a comma in the wrong place, you might actually lose all of your credibility. What I do find sometimes, as I mentioned, I'm a lawyer, like I've done on this podcast, and actually suddenly you do get a little bit more credibility, which I think is something we need to get past a little bit in legal tech as well. But I can't knock it too much. It's given me some unfair opportunities, which I'm pleased to have made the most of.
So do you think then salespeople in the legal tech sort of area, if they are lawyers, is it an advantage?
I don't claim to be to the font of all knowledge on salespeople, so I can only really talk to anecdotes on my side. But I think in legal technology, it is a complex sale very often, especially if you're in enterprise sales. And what that means to me is that actually you need to be part product person, you need to be part customer success person, you need to be part technical person. And I guess you're sort of a consultant as opposed to someone just flipping a product. So actually, in order to be someone who works really well with product, you need to actually understand the end user. And actually, the best product people in legal tech will be really interested in what the end clients are saying to salespeople, but also what your opinion is as well. So I think that's made me, a more effective salesperson, because ultimately, if it wasn't a complex thing we were selling, I think we wouldn't need that skill set. But actually, because it's complex, actually getting really in the weeds of what the use cases are is really important. And actually, a lot of legal technologies are fairly agnostic as to the type of legal practice that they can support. So actually, a really big part of what I do is actually speaking to what I call sort of the central personas within law firms, so heads of innovation, CIOs, etc. I'm missing lots, so I apologize, but making it feel like a real solution to an actual problem. So actually, in diagnosing those, it's helpful that I have had a training contract in the UK where I've covered off real estate, finance, commercial law, data, all this stuff, as well as litigation, of course, where I've got that kind of working knowledge, and I can at least pretend, self-deprecatingly, that I understand the problems they're having, and that can at least sort of identify and walk them through what those are. So I think it's helps you sell solutions, in short, as opposed to just a technology. I guess the other thing, David, right, is you'll have this in your own life. It's really important to actually understand what viscerally affects individuals on a personal level. So when I get this will make you laugh, maybe, David, when I get a new employee in my team, I say, okay, well, we're about to deal with, this senior associate who's 8 years qualified. When they look at our solution, what are they going to what are they going to care about? And they say, well, efficiency and speed with which people are able to draft their contracts. I'm like, you're completely missing the point, mate. What they care about is they care about, essentially getting home, seeing their probably young kids.
Absolutely.
Typically, the other thing might be, are they looking to make partner? Are they looking to stand out?
Absolutely.
They care about their billables. They don't want to necessarily cut their billables. They want to be seen by clients as really effective, really good at what they do. And, they want to be seen as perhaps someone who's tech forward, who can contribute to the firm's strategy. Yep. So it's a lot more nuanced than that kind of headline benefit that we sell it in a solution.
Oh, totally agree. I couldn't agree more. People, the stock standard answer, efficiency, cost savings, you're absolutely right. You're selling to the person. You're actually like dealing with what the person actually wants to achieve. It's their reputation. It's their career goals. It's what the hell they look like in front of clients. It's the fact they can get back home on time. It's the fact they can make more money themselves by doing better work and being appreciated. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think maybe where we do have an unfair advantage is from our lawyers, as well as I viscerally have felt those things myself. So I've got a little brother who is, best part of 10 years younger than me. And I won't name the law firm, but I was working at a well-known American law firm. They're known for excellence, I will say, but also extremely hard work. And my little brother does not want to do an office job, because he thinks an office job is sitting by the computer from 8 a.m. till earliest leaving 11:30 p.m. So, I viscerally have felt this stuff previously. And the fact that he doesn't even want to do that shows me, okay, well, maybe it wasn't making me the happiest.
Yeah, it's incredibly long hours. I mean, that is serious flogging. I mean, you'd want technology to actually make things better for you.
Yeah, and I think, I've said this before on the record, I'm someone who's dyslexic as well. So actually, to be honest, those were just the expected hours in general. And I was actually okay with that at that point in time. I think the bit that really bugs me is actually the amount of work that's being done that is, quite frankly, now being taken by AI. So a lot of the work I was doing was proofreading as a dyslexic person, because I would have to edit everything in there, and I was, anxious about what I was writing. And actually, I was sat there being like, I'm being charged out at X amount per hour. Ultimately, we're probably writing off a lot of what I'm doing, but actually I'm not adding as much value as I could in the time that I'm spending, because you want to feel useful, don't you? I mean, that's just human nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Dyslexia is almost like a superpower, because it means you take another point of view and you understand you've got to make yourself more efficient to get things done.
Yeah, I actually think it's really common in sales as well. I won't comment on my team, but certainly, in the space, I see a lot of people, with dyslexia or other kind of I don't know what the politically correct term is, but things that make them different, really, in the way that they process information. Yeah, and actually, law isn't great for those people. Like, as soon as I kind of was open with that in law, people came out the woodwork and spoke to me about it. So I'm really excited. There's lots of things which drive me in what I do, but one of the things I'm really excited about is actually broadening, the neurodiversity, I suppose, of the people that can be in law. I think it's fair to say that people anecdotally say that there are plenty of neurodiverse people in law, but it'd be good to have some, a real diversity of neurodiversity, as it were.
Yeah, no, we've not really had this as part of the discussion before. I think it is something that people can actually get real benefit out of, having a diversity in their business. Just the whole process of joining a sales team, Avvoka, as you mentioned, it's $500,000 revenue was doing when you joined. Being in a startup like that, tough work.
Absolutely. I think the mission, being aligned on mission, really helps. I'm sure lots of people listening to this will also know David and Elliot, the founders of Avvoka. I think there's no way I would have lasted as long as I did without their support. And also, I think they're both they're going to think I'm such a suck up if they listen to this, which they almost certainly. They've got that combination between being, customer obsessed, very, very product focused. They definitely would trick most people into thinking that they're actually tech people or developers, but also kind of fostering their team and a good culture as well. I think also is that I'm not bulletproof in terms of losses. In most salespeople, like 85 to 90% of the work you do, you actually see no tangible outcome from. David, you know that as well as I do.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm not very good at celebrating those wins, but I think it's also just having a sense of humor about the losses. And frankly, when 6 years ago, maybe I was doing a demo and the system had a bug because they hadn't deployed the right server or something. Actually, also showing they really cared as well. So I think it's like any startup, right? It's about, I hate the word resilience. I actually don't know that, resilience to me is having a sense of humor, but also not applying too much pressure. I don't know, David, when you've built, your businesses, I think it's much more healthy to look back. What have you achieved in the last 3 months rather than what you have achieved this week? Because I feel like I get to the end of the week, David, and I feel like I've never achieved anything.
Absolutely. You're actually context switching all the time. You actually switch between different tasks. You're doing different things, and you look back and you kind of go, what is it I've actually done this week? But I mean, broadly, I totally agree. When you get to the 3 month period, you go, well, actually, I've been doing these little bits of this job, but then you can see the whole picture. You can see it a lot better. It's hard. It's really hard to sort of stick at it. I don't know, stoicism, resilience, whatever word people want to use for it. I mean, basically, I think a sense of humor is actually key certainly in early days in any business like that, because, you celebrate the wins and you celebrate them okay. You don't go nuts about it, but you also then you don't go too hard on yourself about losses, but you try and learn from the losses and take it on board and build from that.
And I think as well, having a balance of people who have a bias to action, to planning as well, because I will get myself knee deep into a situation and then realize that, I should have made a plan beforehand. Something like, for example, I don't know, putting a deposit down on a conference without a plan for how we execute and make the most out of it. But then figuring it out, right, as you go.
So you've been on some trips recently. You've been to Australia. You've done a bit of a tour around the US as well in terms of talking to potential customers in the US and existing customers. I mean, how do you find the different markets?
Yeah, absolutely. So if people have me on LinkedIn, they're probably absolutely sick of me. So apologies, you're seeing me again on David's podcast. Yeah, so I guess differences in the market. I was actually on the phone to someone I met in Australia while I was out there this morning. And they said, we're so behind, the Australians are very sort of tech, what's the word? I don't know, scared of tech. I actually think that's completely wrong. I think it's completely wrong. I think Australians are very self-effacing, but actually I think when it came to AI, for me, they were the quickest adopters of any of the major jurisdictions I operate in. And I mean that in a kind of broad-based way. I find in the UK, certainly the mid-tier firms, I would call them, or mid-sized firms as opposed to tier, they were quite cautious from an information security perspective. Also very conscious from the implications that it would have on knowledge management and that kind of thing. So I think they were relatively slow to move. They're getting there now. Australia, there seems to be a lot less concern around information security. I wouldn't call that kind of a lack of diligence around it. I think people were just a bit quicker to take a view. So, for example, coming to terms with the fact that, hey, if a provider was using the same OpenAI instance with the same kind of data retention as they were the firm was internally, then, well, what's the difference? Let's just go with that provider, or indeed, contractually dealing with it to make sure that there was the right sort of coverage in place without getting too much in the weeds. So I thought, Australians were quite quick to fail fast, which I thought was really cool. And then in America, I mean, they've obviously gone huge on that side of things now, but I would say there was a bit of a wait and see at the very beginning. But now even things like, the M&A activity that's going on there, so Springbok being bought by Cleary, as well as them also, as a matter of public record, partnering with Legora, just shows that, they're not only, signing large contracts for new legal AI providers, but they're also, they're also buying their own in-house function as well. So they're playing lots of different chips. I mean, we've noticed, particularly in the US, we've launched an AI module. We like to think it's quite a thoughtful module, basically geared up to helping people set up automated templates. There's more to it than that. But we've noticed that in the US, increasingly, people piloted it quite early. It was probably a cycle of maybe sort of 12 to 15 months, existing customers. But most of them have now added on that AI functionality to their subscription. But the main consternation there was around information security and actually client approvals. I guess if I was to explain why there's a difference between America and Australia, I would say maybe the relationship between Australian law firms is slightly different with their end clients. I know that they'll have stringent security requirements, but I think maybe the feedback loop was a little bit quicker, as well as the cost pressure in those Aussie firms then actually being able to leverage those AI tools to make their services a little bit cheaper. And I will just quickly touch on the large firms in the UK. I think the large firms in the UK has definitely led the way in a very sort of thoughtful, structured way. And I would put that down to the closeness to a lot of these startups, actually. I think Europe's been doing some really interesting stuff on the AI side. And actually, UK historically led on, in my view, on things like e-discovery back in the day. And there's that muscle memory there for bringing in new technologies.
And culturally speaking, doing business across the world, I've had my own view on it, but how do you find things being different?
I think on the enterprise scale, it's not too difficult. I think sometimes people think you're cleverer than you are if you've got an English accent. So I quite quickly dispel that myth. But yeah, I think on the enterprise level, it's fine. I think where we've maybe struggled a little bit more is, on the state level more, with state focused US law firms. For example, in Texas, we're probably working with the national firms, but they're Florida, they're absolutely enormous markets. I mean, they're the same as numerous countries added together in Europe. But I don't think there's necessarily that trust. They like to have people locally who are speaking that language. And honestly, David, like the practice of law out there is just super different. Things like immigration law, things like personal injury. I mean, they're obviously absolutely huge areas, but it's just not the same over in the UK. So I think that's maybe where it's been the biggest stretch. But look, I find it quite funny. I wouldn't share this information, but I look at like the Aussie market and I see, there's the Kirkland and Ellis of the Aussie market, and there is I won't characterize all of the different firms, but you get the idea. We do quite often see that there is a sort of profile of the market which isn't sort of cookie cutter, but there are resemblances between the different markets, which can be quite helpful when we're thinking about our strategies towards each.
And where's your focus globally? So is it more towards one area than another? Or is it equal?
It's basically by revenue. And we think we have a certain degree of product market fit in the UK, English speaking areas or I guess English speaking areas of Europe, whether that's the first language or not, Canada, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand and Singapore, etc. But look, we're looking to broaden that out. And I think one thing we haven't done is necessarily had enough feet in the ground in these different places. So there are people in the market who might be able to help us with that, and I know that you potentially offer those types of services, David.
Of course,
but we definitely see that value. And look, we've when we talk at a board level within the business, the question we're always asking is where can we find more total addressable market. certainly the mid market is one of those. But actually, enterprise scale law firms across the world, definitely makes sense for us to be targeting more seriously.
Yeah. Where's the company at now? So where are you at client-wise? That kind of, if you can talk about some basic stats of where you are globally now, company-wise.
Yeah, so I mean, oh gosh, I don't know. I think we're probably being used in about clients in about 20 different countries would be my
Wow.
overall impression. But yeah, most of our staff are in the UK. We have a significant presence from a technical perspective in Prague, but we have folks in India, Singapore, Canada, Spain, Portugal, Romania, all over. But I think, over the next year or so, I think you'll see a bit more of a structured, intentioned expansion. So I'm actually half American as well.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm very keen to spend a little bit more time in America, albeit, I've been away for pretty much all of Q1. So I'm just going to make sure my wife doesn't dump me.
Whereabouts would you base yourself in America?
So my mother's from Connecticut. So I think
Okay.
and New York is really, I think, the natural hub for legal tech activity. And a lot of the major innovation folks who make those decisions do sit between sort of Washington, Philadelphia, Boston, and of course New York and New Jersey. So that's a good place to be. Also from a time zone perspective, that I would be able to, and our team would be able to liaise very closely with London, but also provide services to our customers who are over in California.
Yeah.
And hey, it's a great city anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. No, fantastic place. And in terms of that market wise, you're actually doing, so you're doing law firms, you're doing in-house counsel as well. So you're doing corporate counsel?
Yeah, absolutely. So my bias has probably shone through a little bit in this conversation as a private practice, or former private practice lawyer. But yeah, absolutely, we are serving that in-house market. I mean, our website says private practice and in-house. I actually think that's a terrible way of us characterizing it. In-house is so much more complicated than that, because really you're talking about, are you HR focused and the legal processes to do with that? Are you sales or procurement or whatever it might be? And we have customers using us for all of those things. So, from, fast food conglomerates to huge media conglomerates as well. So who are using us for, procuring anything from, hamburgers to commissioning blockbuster films. So that's quite good fun. But yeah, certainly we're being used for all sorts of different things. I guess where our niche would sit is where you've got a complicated agreement that you need to automate. It's not just something as basic as an NDA, and you're doing kind of either private practice level complexity, or you're doing stuff that could be outsourced to private practice, but maybe you've got a more sophisticated, large in-house counsel team.
And do you do volume processes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually launched in the course of this year another product. So we've got the core Avvoka offering, which is as I've described, but we also have a new product called MassDraft, which can either be purchased separately or together. And that is very much, and by the way, that wasn't a setup, anyone who's listening. It is all about generating lots of documents at once, but then also actually those bulk generated documents automatically being able to be routed through to DocuSign and signed in a very streamlined way. So you might have use cases like employee incentive plans, you might have class actions, you might have director and officer questionnaires, all stuff that people internationally will be familiar with.
Fantastic. And how does you, I mean, for our subscribers or audience, how does your pricing kind of work? Is it on per user, or is it per process, or how does that all sort of work? Is that all public?
Yeah, core Avvoka product. It's actually based on packages. So we've got some small packages for SMEs, but then we have our full service package. And with our full service package, there's a whole bunch of stuff included. What we've quite quickly realized is where you are dealing with a intellectual property asset that is so heavily used in a law firm as a contract template or similar. Actually, there needs to be quite a lot of thought that goes in. I mean, we make the technology really simple to take that and turn that into an automated template, but actually the thought process behind it needs to be really thoughtful. So actually, I'm looking at this document. How am I interpreting the mechanics of that from a contractual perspective? And how best do I phrase the questionnaire so that it works really well when that end user goes and fills that questionnaire to generate a document? We've realized that actually there's quite a lot of work that needs to happen from our side to educate around those processes, not even about just using the application, but just sharing use cases and that kind of thing. So all that is to say is our full service package enables us to actually dedicate quite a lot of human resource, i.e. lovely people internally in our team like Patrick, Hugh, Macarena, whomever. They aren't faceless, they are human beings, to go through and share those best practices. And then if people want to scale up from there, we offer the ability to buy extra licenses per user as well. So we've got two personas. That'll be the people answering the questionnaire, your standard folks, we can call them special as well. And then the pro users. So the people who are going in and they're automating the templates. And, the idea with our platform is typically you'll have more pro users than other tools because actually it's super straightforward to actually set up those templates and a bit less resource intensive as well. With Mass Draft, we can either sell an unlimited package for as many mass draft exercises as you like, or we can do it on a transaction per transaction basis, which turns out to be a little bit more expensive, to be honest, but actually some people appreciate that flexibility.
I mean, it's fantastic of that because you don't see that's one of the areas of the whole volume and bulk processing type area and the ability to go and work on, document by document. So fantastic you actually offer that range.
Yeah, absolutely. It just seems to suit the different use cases that we see coming up. I mean, one thing as well is often the mass drafting exercises will be part of a project that is being done either internally within a company or a law firm. So actually, from a billing perspective, for the end client, say, in a private practice team, it makes sense to actually have that be a line item on the bill that sits separately. So, we're also thinking about how the law firm, gets made good for their investment and how we de-risk that whole process, but also how the client wants to pay as well.
So some firms will actually disperse this back to the client for the software. Amazing.
Yeah, which is unusual, but because they've done it the old way, they actually see value there as well.
No, that's
also
fantastic.
Also, David, a lot of these exercises are time limited. Yeah. So the law firm can't actually physically charge that much because there's only so many hours in the day. So actually, their pricing they're doing is more value based as well. So it can work. It obviously totally depends how the law firm wants to structure it, which is why we offer the unlimited option as well.
Oh, brilliant. Integrations, you integrate with a lot of different packages out there, like document management, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's straightforward. The likes of iManage, Net Documents, DocuSign, Adobe Sign. I could keep going. To the extent it isn't set up, and I know my anecdotal experience is that actually, I know this is going out globally, but a lot of the Aussie firms have built their own stuff. So we can use our API to work with where there's something a little bit more fruity, I suppose.
We were talking before we started the video about some of the initiatives you're actually taking around training and expertise in the marketplace. Do you want to cover some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you. I think one of the really key things that I've realized in selling what is quite a sophisticated product is, often it's a big undertaking to decide that you want to do a document automation project, and you actually want to change the way that lawyers fundamentally go about starting their contract or legal document drafting process. That's not, regardless of how easy the tech is, that's not something you do lightly. So I think one thing we feel a real responsibility to do is to actually help the whole market, regardless of whether they're buying our tool or someone else's, to make sure that they're asking the right questions ahead of purchasing a tool, but also to ask the right questions internally about finding those right use cases. It's not a sales thing. It's about people actually understanding what the benefits are of document automation and actually whether it's right for them. And also identifying that, hey, a problem's come up now. I know what the right solution would be down the line. So it's people having that education, that awareness that this tool is there for as and when they do actually want to use it. And it feels like, from a strategic perspective for the organization, it's the right time. It's also about communication. If you're good in legal innovation, you have a great network and you're talking to other people all the time about mistakes they've made, things they've done well. And frankly, it's a bit incestuous, right, David? You're probably hiring people from within that ecosystem as well to help you. So we try and build a community around document automation, because what I realized when I've entered this space is there are people that have been doing this for 20, 30 years.
Yes.
No exaggeration. And that knowledge isn't going to evaporate and go away. That is so important. Yes, some of the technical processes we're going to make easier and more accessible, but the project management, the advisory aspects of what they've learned are absolutely vital. And I think a lot of those individuals, I feel quite passionately, they get on and they do the job, and they don't often get the credit for the fact that they are literally the petrol that the engine is running on. So it's actually giving a little bit of exposure to the work that's doing there, because often people only realize when, whoopsie, we run out of fuel and we need someone to go run down to the gas station and pick up a Bowser, and wait, actually there isn't any available there either because it's a finite resource. So it's about flagging those people, and giving them, people who are new to that community, advice around when they ultimately do decide to go into document automation. Sometimes they realize it's not for them and actually they're not resourced properly, and they may come back later.
No, fantastic initiative, and giving recognition where it's due. What are you seeing out there in the marketplace right now? What trends are you seeing?
Yeah, so I'm definitely seeing a trend towards people just doing what they were doing before. I think there is an element of that for sure. People are realizing who slapped AI on something and then just kind of flipped it and sold it in a kind of wrapper way, or indeed just kind of created a chatbot that nobody asked for. However, we are seeing people go back to the types of projects they were doing before, looking at solutions rather than technologies in isolation. And they are using AI. They're just doing it in a kind of solution focused way. So, people are using our tool and they're using AI to augment the processes they were already taking. And ultimately, when people are making cases to their boards or budget holders, they're saying we're using AI, but here's how we're actually adding value with it. And actually what's quite nice is it's unlocking more budget for just the normal projects, as long as they can add that AI is helping somehow. So that's one thing I'm seeing, slightly less tongue in cheek. I'm seeing two things really. I guess agentic. Everyone's using the word agentic every 5 minutes. I kind of think of it as integrations plus. Really, agentic isn't very helpful unless, agentic systems aren't really helpful unless your integrations are set up properly. So for it to be a true agentic system, it needs access to a number of tools and it needs to have a degree of autonomy. So things like, adding in Adherent, adding in, iManage, adding in DocuSign, adding in repositories of databases about partners, for example, and their information, plugging all of these things into a document automation system and enabling an agent to, go about selecting, say, the right template that you need to use for a particular task, and then pulling in data which might be used to fill out the questionnaire from different places, such as Adherent or databases or iManage. And then subsequently using information from iManage as context for marking up a document. These types of agentic workflows, really, really relevant to document automation. And I guess the second part is we're seeing more demand for document automation being added as a component into other agentic systems that are being designed. So, we're all really familiar with the likes of, Harvey, Legora, other tools like that, VLEX's tool, general purpose LLMs, which in the user interface. I'm seeing a trend towards other applications being plugged into those where there is a kind of point solution that is being asked for within their user interface. So, bringing it back to what I was talking about earlier, it's really about integrations, because ultimately agentic is completely useless and it's not really agentic without those, and then figuring out the most common workflows that people actually want an agent to help with, where it actually adds value. So integration heavy processes, adding agentic elements to them.
And do you see many firms actually running agentic type processes or workflows?
Not true ones, to be honest. We're at the stage where everybody's talking about it, and then a few really clever people are working on it in the background and not necessarily talking about it. That said, I'm probably seeing between 10 and 20% of the conversations I'm having, either with existing clients or prospective clients, having a facet of this. I mean, the way it's instantiating itself at the moment is people are looking for tools that have flexible APIs and they have good data architectures. So often, there's a bit of when we're doing a competitive process, there's kind of a undefined element, which is how well would this platform be future-proofed for an agentic world, which is where else we're going. So that's often, not too specific a conversation that's happening, but it's like, okay, we need people when this becomes a really big deal. Our whole architecture needs to be able to be interoperable.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, a massive amount of value that you and your team add in terms of talking to firms about the industry, about workflows, about creating business cases for document automation, just general knowledge about that. So definitely worth a chat with you if folks are actually interested. Giles, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you, David. Really appreciate your time.